with fatigue, you want to know what's causing fatigue. Here it is.
Yeah.
Nightshades are definitely contributing. So there's a lot of things. I mean, he's got the thyroid, which contributes to fatigue. He's got those estrogen genes.
Yeah.
He's got the vitamin D genes. They're definitely linked to fatigue. He's got the gluten sensitivity. He's got the CRP, which is, I mean, there's a lot of targets here. And
Did you catch that? There's a lot of targets here with this gene here. So that's what we're going to unpack here today. And I'm going to show you that not one diet fits all. And I'm going to show you that some people have got elite and great genetics, and some people have got average and garbage genetics. And you might be thinking, what if I've got garbage genetics? That's cool. We can fix that. I consider myself to have garbage genetics. I'm going to show you the ones in this video today. And I'm also going to show you what to do to fix this once and for all. Now, I've got this gene, the nightshade insecticide gene. All right. So there's a lot of vegetables I can't eat. There's a lot of supplements I can't take. Like things like capsicum, rosemary, huperzine, caffeine, ginkgo, bell peppers, TMG supplements, and also ashwagandha is in this nightshade family. And we're all told about how fantastic ashwagandha is. Good for me. It might be any good for you. So supplements you got to be very careful of. And once you understand your genetics, it's pretty easy. Now, you don't have to do your genetics. You can also do something else that I'll show you at the end of this video. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It's pretty simple. The elimination diet that I'll reveal to you and how to check it out and follow it, it takes a bit of time to dial in, but you got the rest of your life to get your testosterone and your energy back. So not one diet fits all. You'll hear the government and the system says, eat plenty of vegetables and eat plenty of this and have low protein and low fat and you'll thrive. Didn't work for me. Mightn't work for you. Does work for some people, but we're all different. And that's the point I'm trying to elucidate here today. So let's just kind of unpack genetics just a little bit, and I'll start piecing it together as we progress. And now I'm no expert. I'm just hungry to perform at a very high level. I'm nearly 52, and because I've finally gotten this right, I understand my genetics, I thrive. I feel as good at 52 as I did in my late teens. Now, that's kind of hard to hear, but that's how I feel. That's my experience. It's taken me a long time to get here, and I've worked with experts in this space. So just to unpack it a little bit, this is a testosterone gene here, and this is a SNP that lowers testosterone. So you're probably thinking, what if I got this gene, Mark? Am I doomed to have low testosterone? No, you can significantly increase testosterone. We've done it successfully with a lot of men. So how do we start to think about this? Well, some people have got elite and great genetics. Now, these legends, they'll get to 60, 70, 80, 90. They'll be kicking ass, great cognition, a lean body, and they're just like, what the hell's wrong with you? Jesus, get up there and just do shit. They've just got remarkable capacity to clear out toxins and chemicals and optimize hormones and energy and longevity pathways. That ain't me. Mightn't be you. Then you got people with average genetics, and these poor legends, they listen to mainstream advice. And by 30 or 40, they start to pack on the fat, the cognition starts to tank a little bit, and their testosterone starts to decline. And then they believe mainstream narrative about declining testosterone. It's not supposed to decline. Then you got people with garbage genetics, and this is where I classify myself. At 25, that's when it started happening to me. I know what it's like to be a broken man. Panic attacks, performance anxiety. Hell, I was so deeply worried about what other people thought of me, I got hair transplants. Yeah, I had massive problems. So these SNPs here, right, single nucleotide polymorphisms, sometimes you got a double copy of them, sometimes one copy, but here's the magic. Some of them work really fast. Some of them work average, and some of them work really slow. Now, this is where it gets exciting because this is my stress genetics. I'm in the 82nd percentile. Now, what that means is that when my foot hits the gas pedal to make stress hormones, I make them much faster and in larger quantities than the average person. so I can slow that down and optimize stress hormones. Beautiful. If you've got this gene here for slow testosterone production, you can speed it up. The same is true with fatigue. I'm in the 79th percentile. I'm not supposed to have a lot of energy, but here I am. So you can speed that up. And I'm going to unpack how I finally solved my anxiety, panic attacks, performance anxiety. I'm in the 98th percentile, so I shouldn't have confidence. I shouldn't be able to speak on stage, but I do. It's because I've finally put in the work and gotten this right over time. So all the other videos in this series are linked below and you can check them out. And I'm going to start to talk about them as we progress. But you know what really grinds my gears? This here. Huberman, and also my advisor, Dr. J, who did a 5-year PhD in hormones, Dr. J said it's surprising how little testosterone declines as you age if you optimize your health. And Huberman, and right on screen there, you can see that men in their 90s that are not rare, they're making as much testosterone and dihydrotestosterone as they were in their 20s. Huh, interesting. And the big problem, as I spoke about in previous videos, is this aromatase enzyme, because it leads to hypogonadism. And for most men on the planet, they are just inappropriately activating that enzyme. And that enzyme takes your hard-earned T and turns it into estrogen. When estrogen gets to a certain level, it shuts you down cold. And you might only be at, say, 350 testosterone, and you're shut down. So if we can stop the inappropriate upregulation of aromatase, we're a long step in the right direction. Now, just to dive into a little bit deeper, back in 2020, when I started piecing this all together, I found Dr. Amy B. Keelan. Dr. Amy is an expert in sexual performance and longevity. And I wanted to know a little bit more about testosterone because she's an expert, especially for men with testosterone. So I interviewed her, and this is what she said. Listen.
It's also things that are even more important. We know that men who have lower testosterone levels, they tend to have higher mortality rates in general. So all-cause mortality is higher in men with the lowest quartile of testosterone levels. So we're going to see increases in things like cardiovascular disease. So heart attacks, strokes are going to go up generally if you have low testosterone, increased diabetes, increased obesity, increased problems with mood disorders, depression, insomnia, anxiety. All of that goes up as you have lower testosterone levels. And then certainly sexual dysfunction. So everything from low libido to low sperm counts and infertility are all associated with low testosterone. So it's not something that we should just brush off as being like, it's no big deal. Like, it's kind of a big deal. It actually means that our men are getting less and less healthy, and they're more and more likely to suffer from some kind of disease problem.
So why does mainstream brush it off? And why do they say expect low testosterone as you age? Why? Good question. Now, as I mentioned previously, Dr. J, the legend, 5-year PhD in hormones, this is what he said. And he said that there's men in their 90s, and he said this isn't rare, and they've got as much testosterone and dihydrotestosterone as they did in their 20s.
Oh, yeah. It's true.
Yep.
It's surprising how little it goes down with age.
Yep.
If you optimize your health,
Yeah. And if you optimize your health, and the system really doesn't do that for us. As you saw on the first video there, that one gene alone, fatigue and anxiety for me. And you might be thinking, well, why? Well, it's part of the system's business model. Listen.
It's not thriving. It's definitely suboptimal. It's frustrating, honestly. I mean, especially on the topic of testosterone, because if your testosterone goes down, just your health in general goes down. So that opens the door to a bunch of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so the pharma companies are very excited about keeping your testosterone down from a financial perspective.
Exactly.
As a business model, it's a good idea for them.
It's a great idea for them because you get on there, on the big pharma drugs, you're a customer for life. And Dr. Ken Berry, I've spoken to Dr. Ken a lot of times, and this is what he said about those prescription drugs.
All those things are symptoms of low testosterone, and there's a long list of prescription medications that you might be taking from your doctor, your doctor that you trust, that could actually be plummeting your testosterone levels. I've got a YouTube video about medications that lower testosterone. In case any of you guys are taking a medication, you can watch that video and make sure you're not taking one that does, by definition, lower your testosterone.
Yeah, so these big pharma drugs, they lower testosterone and they increase estrogen. So as I mentioned earlier, when estrogen goes up, shuts down testosterone. So that's a big problem. Pharmaceuticals, they've got chemicals in them, petroleum chemicals, medical devices, even things like old Tylenol here lowers testosterone. It's anti-androgenic. It actually increases estrogen. And it gets worse with big pharma drugs. Like if you've got this SNP here, right there, it metabolizes chemicals and pharmaceutical chemicals. So pharmaceuticals are chemicals. So if you got this gene, it takes a long time to get these chemicals out of your system. And I spoke to Dr. J a couple of weeks ago, and this is what he said about one of his clients that had an adverse reaction to pharmaceuticals.
And seed oils, of course, pretty basic. Boy, everybody should, but especially Chad.
I like it how you've changed it to pharmaceuticals and chemicals.
Yeah. Exactly. I separated that out.
Yeah. As I learned, the pharmaceuticals actually lower testosterone and bias testosterone to go through aromatase to turn into estrogen.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because one of my coaches yesterday had a client that had a gene in that section.
Yep.
Yeah, where they were very sensitive to a lot of different pharmaceutical drugs, and they had just had a reaction, like a terrible reaction to some blood pressure medication or something, and almost died.
Oh, wow. Jesus.
So it was like, yeah, now we know why.
Yeah, so he's got that gene in the pharmaceuticals. Blood
exactly.
Kill him. That's just crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, so why don't they ask you about this? Why don't they do a genetic test to see if you're going to react to these big pharma drugs? Right. Big pharma, they lobby it. Yeah, they lobby the government. They promote this. This is their business model. So I've got a link to this website there that just shows you all of these drugs that you could be sensitive to. All right. So the big problem, I'll come to this in a moment, but the big problem for a lot of people, they've got no clue that when you've got too much insulin, cortisol, xenoestrogens from chemicals, or phytoestrogen from plants, your blood trigs are up too high, you've got inflammation out of control, or estrogen itself, it upregulates the aromatase. So all your hard-earned T goes to estrogen, and you turn into this person there. So everything that mainstream says comes true. And this is where it gets ridiculous. It's absurd. I spoke about the difference between standard labs and labs that optimize human health, as Dr. J said. So a standard lab says fasting insulin is okay when it's between 2.6 and 24.9. Peak human performance, 2 to 5. Can you see the massive difference there? So say your fasting insulin is 8 or even 10, you're going to be biasing your hard-earned T to go through aromatase and turn to estrogen. So you could get to, say, 500 testosterone, and then you shut down cold. And then you've got to metabolize all those estrogens. So how do you metabolize the estrogens? In the next video, I'll show you exactly how to do that. But it's gut health, liver, and thyroid. All right. What we're talking about here today is that your diet can screw you up. If you're eating the wrong foods for you, it's like poison in your body, as I mentioned with that first gene there. And that upregulates the aromatase enzyme. So the question becomes, what is healthy estrogen levels? Well, let's ask the expert, Dr. J, who did a 5-year PhD on sex hormones.
So our natural estrogen is about 20 for men, 20 nanograms per liter. And again, like
so about 20, maybe 15 to probably maybe 40, you're going to be kind of okay. But you start going above that, what happens is you shut down, inappropriately shut down because estrogen's too high. And you might only be at 200 or even 600 and you shut down until your liver metabolizes all those estrogens and gets back to healthy levels. So this drawing that I've got here, this is the brain and this is the ball sack. So how does our brain tell the ball sack to make man juice, testosterone? Well, you've got this thing called a pulse generator, and I'll explain that in depth in a moment over here with this study. It's very important, that study. So you produce this glycoprotein hormone called LH. LH makes its way to the ball sack and says, make testosterone. That's how it happens. So if we've got healthy estrogen, we don't have stress in our body, then we can increase testosterone to healthy levels. We've got to stop the inappropriate upregulation of that aromatase enzyme. Stress, inflammation, bad blood panels that aren't optimized for human health are the biggest cause of low T. And this study, he really shines a torch on that. And there's many more like this study. So they got healthy men. And what they wanted to do is to see if they could do two things: increase the pulse of luteinizing hormone over here and the amplitude. So more LH, more power to make more testosterone. So they blocked aromatase, right? They blocked it with a drug. It increased LH pulse frequency, some more pulses to make more testosterone, and also the pulse amplitude, more LH to make more testosterone. So we can kind of see how now that estrogen really controls our testosterone levels. So what we got to really start to think about is that stress in the body and in the mind will cause the inappropriate upregulation of the aromatase enzyme and shut us down cold from making testosterone until we metabolize those estrogens and get them back to healthy levels. So estrogen is very protective of the heart and the arteries, and that's one of the reasons it goes up. It's super helpful when you've got a lot of stress in your body. So you can see how this works. Now, one thing when it comes to mindset, some people have got a very large amygdala and it's got a high activation potential. So what does that mean? Well, if you've got a lot of stress in the body, you produce a lot of stress hormones, namely cortisol. And cortisol increases the size of the amygdala here, right? And do your due diligence, search on PubMed, but the research is out. Cortisol grows the amygdala. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, shit, can I even fix that at all? Yes. When I had panic attacks, my amygdala would have been huge and have a high activation potential. So in about 8 weeks, you can have a significant reduction in the size of the amygdala, that downward inflection there. Very significant there. So you feel less stress. You're not triggered as much emotionally to start thinking negative thoughts. And there's another important piece of the puzzle. This is how I finally got over my anxiety and started to be able to speak on stage. So this study that you see on screen there, the brain represents people as the mental states they habitually experience, right? These findings demonstrate that the brain represents people as the sum of the mental states they experience. So if you experience more anxiety, your brain literally rewires for you to become anxious. The amygdala grows, its activation potential goes high through the roof, and our food can do that. So what I'm going to show you now is what I call the 9 stages of anxiety dominance. So you can see we're very biochemical. Neurotransmitters and hormones change our emotionality. And if we stay in states of anger, let me bring that down a little bit. States of anger, fear over here, shame over here, like Spider-Man, kind of looks a bit like Spider-Man. Anxiety. We want more love and happiness. That's what we want. So how does it all play out? Well, to understand that, I want to play this video in its entirety. So this is one of the genes that I have, and it can drive fatigue and anxiety. Listen.
With fatigue, you want to know what's causing fatigue. Here it is. Nightshades are definitely contributing.
So these nightshade, definitely contributing, but also to anxiety with the caffeine.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. I mean, he's got the thyroid, which contributes to fatigue. He's got those estrogen genes. Yeah. He's got the vitamin D genes. They're definitely linked to fatigue. He's got the gluten sensitivity. He's got the CRP, which is, there's a lot of targets here, and he's got to dial them all in, intermittent fast. And this is where caffeine actually comes back up, because this gene, it's involved in caffeine doesn't just break down with one single process in your body.
Mhm.
There's multiple enzymes that are involved in breaking it down. So a little bit of it gets broken down, and then it goes down the line, and then it gets broken down a little bit more, and then it goes down the line and and this is on that assembly line where that's involved in breaking down caffeine, BCAE.
Yep.
So caffeine stays in his body longer because of this gene.
Right.
So therefore it could trigger more anxiety.
All right. So as you can see there, food can trigger anxiety, and we become the sum of the mental states we habitually experience. Our brain rewires to become that person. That's what happened to me over time, and I had no clue. So I became anxious, panic attacks, performance anxiety, deeply worried about what other people thought of me. So this is how I think about the 9 stages that changes your personality over time. So the foods you eat and the chemicals that we're exposed to can trigger fatigue and anxiety. That then becomes emotion, energy, emotion over here. So our biochemistry changes. Then we don't have anxious thoughts. We feel anxious with our biochemistry over here. Then we'll have anxious thoughts, and that triggers those damn pesky negative thoughts. And that tanks our performance. We bury our head in the sand. We get stressed out. And we just want to go home and forget about it. Then we get into that negative self-talk feedback loop. That strengthens the belief, oh, I'm an anxious person. Then that updates our character traits, and that's who we become over time. And the great news is I've learned we can move in the opposite direction to be calm and confident under pressure. And we can get to that place. But what we have to understand is that not one diet fits all. We've got to get our blood work in optimal human health ranges, not these big juxtapositions with standard panels. And if you want to learn more about that and how to do it, that video is linked below. So as you can see, it's a bit of a mess out there for a lot of people. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about with mindset, and it is huge, that a lot of people think that it's testosterone that makes you aggressive. Professor Huberman has said on a few podcasts, and I'll just quote what he says. I want to repeat, it is not testosterone itself that triggers an aggression. It is testosterone aromatized into estrogen within the brain, binding to these estrogen receptor-containing neurons in the ventral medial hypothalamus that evokes aggression. So when we get into a pissy mood in traffic, we are chemically castrating ourselves from making testosterone. And as a double whammy, what little testosterone we've got left, we're turning into estrogen. Estrogen rises. We feel like shit. We get to the end of the day and we're just gassed emotionally, cognitively, physically. So what do? Pizza and booze to take the edge off. That's what I used to do. I did that for a lot of years. And it makes a lot of sense. The more you do digging in the scientific literature, you can see how this happens. So this one here is stress-induced cognitive dysfunction. So over here, when you don't have a lot of energy, you're drowsy, inattentive, you're apathetic, you're cognitively impaired. But over here, this is the butter zone. This is where you want to be. But too much stress, anxiety, cognitive impairment. So this study was all about people, the yellow here, with low estrogen and the people with high estrogen. So they showed that high and low estrogen individuals performed equally well at working memory tasks under no stress conditions, but just mild stress shifts high estrogen down into the stress zone over here, right? And we feel anxious. So you can see how this starts to play out. So what we've got to do is stop the inappropriate upregulation of that aromatase enzyme, get the stress out of the body, and find out the foods that are like poison to us, because not one diet fits all. Legends, if you like these videos, join the conversation below and share this so we can reach more men to finally get to a place where we feel good. We feel like kicking ass in life. So the way I like to think about it is that we got 2 things that change how we feel. We've got neurotransmitters that trigger brain circuits like the amygdala, fear, anxiety, aggression, which pushes up estrogen, makes us feel like shit. And these neurotransmitters hit certain brain circuits in your brain that go to a certain brain region that release peptides into the bloodstream. And if it's a chemical signature here of anxiety, we'll start to produce the biochemistry of anxiety. But we can move in the opposite direction and produce testosterone under pressure. And that's what we want to get to. So neurotransmitters last from seconds to minutes. They trigger brain circuits that chemically make us either anxious or courageous. That's how it works. And hormones last from minutes to days. So if we can keep testosterone in the up position, we're a long step in the right direction. Why? Because it lowers fear and anxiety and increases courage, confidence, and optimism, right? The only thing that's going to make you aggressive, right, is when you just get way too aggressive, way too many stress hormones, and then we know what happens, coming from Professor Huberman. So here are the 15 things that we've researched, and I'll dive deep into these 15 things at the end of this video. But in a nutshell, they take all our androgens, DHEA, testosterone, and the most powerful form of testosterone in our body, dihydro, through aromatase, turn to estrogen, we feel like shit. Those 15 things right there. So testosterone does a lot of amazing things for men, namely free T. That's what we want to push up. Lowers fear and anxiety, increases courage, confidence, and optimism. One of the most significant things that it does for men, coming from Professor Huberman, it makes effort feel good. And that's free T at optimal levels consistently. So can you imagine how you will feel if you have optimal testosterone, namely free T, consistently in the up position? You're going to kick ass, and you don't need elite genetics to get this right. You just have to work harder at it. As I mentioned, some people are genetically blessed. I'm not. I believe I've got garbage genetics. So if I can get this right, is it a ridiculous idea to think that you can't? I'm at a place now where I love speaking on stage, speaking to men about this important topic so they can kick ass in life. This is where you can go. Even if you've got anxiety and panic attacks, you can get there. It can take a year to get there, but shit, when you get there, you feel completely different as a man. So what we covered in previous videos, and they're all linked below, these chemicals are a big problem. We've got to get them out of our body because they mimic estrogen. They're anti-androgenic, which means they lower testosterone, and they also screw up our thyroid hormone, so our energy goes to shit. And thyroid hormone boosts testosterone. So let's start to explore what this how genetics works. And I want to show you the biggest things that, Dr. J and I have worked with a lot of men, and I'm going to reveal to you the biggest ones, the biggest culprits that are always showing up that really tank our testosterone, our energy, and make us feel like shit. So as I mentioned there, you've got your things that you eat and the chemicals we put on, onto our body. They act on genes and enzymes. They're either going to decrease performance here, so you end up with this four-cylinder V8, the four-cylinder engine inside you. So you put your foot down the gas to crush it, and it's kind of like, yeah, nah, not really working. Or you can put things in your body that increase performance, and you can slap a V8 in there with a supercharger on that son of a bitch. So let's start having a look at some of these things that can screw you up. Now, this one here is a nightshade gene. It is kind of rare, but it does show up in a few men. And you've got to avoid nightshade foods and plant insecticides, supplements like huperzine, ginkgo, too much caffeine, bell peppers and chilies, TMG, rosemary. There are a few of the things that you got to avoid. And how many times, especially here on YouTube, you're told that ashwagandha is good? Well, it's a nightshade. So if you've got this gene and you take ashwagandha, it will backfire. It will cause fatigue and anxiety. But to make matters worse with this nightshade gene, I've actually got 2 copies. And luckily for me, they're only homozygous. So I've only got 1 copy. If you're heterozygous, you've got 2 copies. So this gene here, now I had 5 shoulder surgeries because I had stress in my body that I should never have had. And as you can see here, I had to go under general. And under general, if you've got this gene here, they pump you full of this thing called succinylcholine. It's a muscle relaxant. And every time I came out of general, the nurses, they couldn't wake me up. They shook me. They tried to wake me up, and I could, it was awful coming out of general. And that's why. So if I ever go into general again, I'm going to tell my doctor not to put this in there because I've got this gene. Now, because we also know that it includes pesticides. So this gene metabolizes pesticides. So if you don't eat organic with this gene, it's going to cause anxiety and fatigue. So what we're told to eat doesn't work for everybody. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. So that's just one gene there. Let's look at a couple more. So here's another one. This is a lectin gene, and this is super common, this gene, super common. And look at what it does.
The lectin is the big one. That's a 4-fold higher risk of heart disease, even as a plus minus, the SELE.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lectins are going to trigger a lot of damage to the arteries and damage to the gut. I would recommend avoiding grains. Grains are the major source of lectins.
Yeah.
And his gut's very sensitive to grains also, with the gluten. And he's got a thyroid gene comes up later with gluten as well. So I would say just take off the grains,
About probably 60%. We've done about 140. I've got this lectin gene. Nightshades, probably 15, not very common. This gluten gene here, at least 80%. There's lots, like if you get tested for celiac and you get a negative, you can still have gluten sensitivity, and it's going to cause fatigue and anxiety and destroy your gut. Now, there's a couple of other genes that I want to mention here. So you've got this BDNF gene, and you don't want less BDNF. Scientists have learned that BDNF is like brain fertilizer. We want more brain fertilizer. That is absolutely key. And another one here, and this comes to Alzheimer's and carbs, right? Your brain handles carbs poorly. So what do you do if you got that gene? Well, that's my gene. And do I eat carbs? Yes, I eat carbs at every single meal, but it's taken me a long time to get to that place. And I eat about 200 grams per day. So that's where I am now. But when I first started to get this right, I could only tolerate about 80 grams of carb. So it took me a long time to get to that place. So the big problem with this gene, with carbohydrates, is this.
And the carbs, again, it's funny. We've got two in a row with this gene. It's not that common, but Johnny's brain does not handle carbs particularly well. He probably knows this. He probably feels tired in the afternoon if he has a bunch of carbs at lunch.
Yeah.
Skip carbs for lunch. Only have them for dinner time. Very simple.
Another one.
So, yeah. And the brain doesn't handle carbs too well. So, yeah.
Right. I think every client we've had today has had poor carb tolerance with their brain, which is interesting because
It's such a shame because imagine the kids at school that have the same genetics, they just can't perform at school.
right, you can't focus.
So that was me at school. I couldn't focus. And my teachers said to my parents that, no, your son's not very smart. He should work with his hands. Well, if you know your genetics, you can certainly increase your cognition, your focus, and your earning potential when you know your genetics there. And again, even though I've got this brain gene, I can still eat plenty of carbs. And I'll talk about how I did that on not the next video, but the video after that. It's what I call the personal carbohydrate threshold. So don't miss that one, especially if you enjoy your carbs. Like I love rice pudding. That's one of the things I have. I love rice pudding. So this lectin gene here, as Dr. J said, then not only is it going to destroy your heart and your arteries, but it's also going to destroy your gut. So, lectins, and it's pretty common to have a lectin sensitivity. And another big problem with lectins is that even without carbohydrates, guess what it does to your insulin here? It raises it way up, way high. And you want your insulin to be, kind of about here or here. So when you have your carbs, you want it to come up a little bit and come back down. You don't want to be doing this shit because when insulin goes up, it's very difficult to tap into your body fat. So as you can see, not one diet fits all. And we're all different. Some people have elite genetics, great genetics. Some people have average, and some people have garbage genetics. And it doesn't matter if you've got garbage genetics. You can fix this. And there's two ways that you can fix this. You can get your genes red, or you can do an elimination diet. Elimination diet works very well, but it just takes a bit more time to dial in. It takes a bit more testing. All right. So another big problem, as I mentioned with that gene of mine, I don't handle pesticides too well. So in a lot of grains, it's got lectins and gluten, and it's also got this potent estrogen mimic called ZEA there, as Dr. J has got written in his book here, Estrogeneration, potent estrogenics. Where is it? Rice, bread, puffed wheat, corn snacks, wheat flour. And to make matters worse, they put pesticides in it like atrazine. So it's kind of everywhere. So the way you want to think about it is if you're sensitive to lectins, your brain doesn't handle carbs too well, you've got nightshade problems and gluten sensitivity. This is just a few of them. You could have factor 2 or factor 5, which means you've got thick, sludgy blood, so you got to do things with that as well. But basically, in a nutshell, the foods that you eat or choose to eat are either turning into this obese person here that's anxious, or it's turning into a lean, mean machine that's just going to kick ass. So not one diet fits all. That's the big point that I'm trying to make. I just want to give you some clues to start getting this right from the get-go. Now, as I've learned over the years now, big food puts a lot of emulsifiers in their food. And back in, I got it here. Yeah, 2017. There was no safety concerns for E471, right? And then they did some more research and they found that in Western diets with these emulsifiers, it caused intestinal damage and endoplasmic reticulum stress, right? So you got low-grade inflammation. So bacteria from your foods go into the bloodstream, cause a state of low-grade inflammation there, glucose intolerance, and increased risk of irritable bowel disease. So basically, these emulsifiers act like detergent. They wash away the protective lining of your gut. So the way I think about it is this. If it's organic, it comes off an animal, it comes off a tree or out of the ground, it's safe. If big foods had any fucking thing to do with it, it's probably a good idea to put that shit back and get something that's come off an animal, out of the tree, or out of the ground. So that's how I like to think about it. Now, just one more caveat before I show you what to do and how to get this right. This one seems harmless, right? Citric acid. Yeah, seems pretty harmless. Right, seems pretty harmless. Right, well, it's manufactured citric acid. Now, as the science is now revealing, and there's lots of research out on citric acid, the manufactured type, the FDA placed manufactured citric acid under the category of GRAS without any research to substantiate that claim. Okay? So what they've found is that they believe that citric acid can lead to harmful inflammatory cascade, which manifests in different individuals based on their genetics, predisposition, and basically it's just going to screw you up. So most of the products out there have this citric acid in it, and additives and preservatives, they might seem harmless, but think again. All right. Anytime big foods had anything to do with anything, more than likely, it's going to tank you, cause fatigue, and cause anxiety. And here's more research on these processed foods that come in boxes, jars, cereals, all of that shit. Science has found that they are amplifiers of systemic inflammation. That's right. The role of advanced glycation and lip oxidization end products in foods, so the foods that we eat. Number one here, atherosclerosis, lipid oxidization. Then you've got arthritis. Then you've got asthma. Then you've got 50 times more free radicals. Then you've got endocrine disorders, right? That's all of your hormones are fucked up. Then you've got shortening of telomeres, which means advanced aging of your skin and all of your cells. So we're aging faster. And as we now know, they're packed full of potent estrogenics, right? And they upregulate the aromatase enzyme, they mimic estrogen, and they will drive hypogonadism, all right? It's a mess. Anything that big foods had anything to deal with, stay away. And to give you more, to weaponize you more, to make more intelligent decisions about what you put in and on your body, this is Dr. Amy B. Keeling speaking about something very serious.
These cells within the penis, these smooth muscle cells, begin to die. This is called apoptosis. Apoptosis happens for a number of reasons, but once you lose about 15% of the cells within here, all of a sudden you lose the ability to expand completely. You can still expand, you can still have an erection, but it's not a full erection. And so when that happens, you've got your tunica, but those veins are staying open. So the blood comes in, but the blood then goes right back out of these open veins because you haven't expanded fully and you don't have a full erection. Does that make sense? So this is called venous leak, CVOD, but it's not a vein problem. It's actually a problem with the cells inside the corpora cavernosa. These cells, these smooth muscle cells, are the problem. Now, what causes these cells to die? Oxidative stress of some sort. So things that cause inflammation and oxidative stress can increase the death of these cells. So that could be just age, but it also could be poor lifestyle choices. It could be diabetes or high blood pressure. It could be a high sugar diet. It could be not exercising. Also, low testosterone over time could do that. So anything that causes these cells within the penis to die is going to compromise your ability to maintain an erection because those veins don't get clamped off properly against the tunica albuginea when you have a partial erection.
All right. So all the foods, this is what's happening, 50 times more free radicals, right? Oxidative stress, inflammation, everything that she just said, and it drives low testosterone. So everything they say to do, the cereals, the breads, all of that shit, what is it doing? Is it really benefiting us? It's convenient, it's cheap, but your body becomes cheap, right? You pack on the fat, you start to become busted inside. Then you go on those big pharma meds and they keep testosterone clamped down, but to make matters worse, what little testosterone you're making goes through that aromatase enzyme and turns into estrogen. It is a mess out there. So I can't emphasize enough two things. Get away from big food, get away from big pharma and start to eat real organic food, especially if you've got garbage genetics like me. So I'm forced to eat organic foods. So that's just, I'm happy to. Why? Because I thrive. I'm at a place now where I feel as good at, I'm just about 52. At 52, I feel as good as I did in my late teens. And that's saying something, let me tell you. All right, so here's the 15 things that cause the inappropriate upregulation of the aromatase enzyme and turn your hard-earned DHEA, testosterone, and dihydro into estrogen. So when your CRP is too high, you will be doing it. When you got the chemical estrogens or the phytoestrogen from foods, it'll do it. If cortisol's too high, so that's your mindset, that'll do it. Or sleep, if your omega index is below 8%, and that was the last video I did, it's below, that will do it. If you got insulin resistance, if you're on big pharma meds, if you got a high body fat, if your trigs are over 88, if you got iron overload, if you got elevated estrogen, if you got elevated SHBG, if you got too much prolactin, low dopamine, or poor gut health, that will do it. So the point that I'm making is the dose makes the poison. Everyone is different. We've got different genetics. And when we understand our genetics or do an elimination diet, we fucking thrive. And that's the point. Legends, we can get to that place. It's not going to happen overnight. You don't need elite genetics and you don't need fancy supplements. But if you've had some damage to the old ball sack there, yes, you will need fancy supplements to get them back up to speed. But you can do it. All right, so let's think about what we've covered so far. Our food can make us turn into an anxious person. And I've explained how that happens. But to make matters worse, when we try to perform under pressure, we have decreased cortical activity. We have ums and ahs. We can't remember where we're up to. The amygdala gets reduced and it physically gets larger. So what we want to be able to do is to perform under pressure when we speak on stage or whatever it is we do. So we've got increased cortical activity so we can remember where we're up to. We've got great memory recall, consolidation, working memory, divergent, convergent thinking, remote associations. And then we can kick ass and be the best man that we were born to be. We can increase our earning potential, create wealth, and kick ass in life. And as we covered there, are you really tired and anxious? Or are these things triggering you for your personality to change over time? Because that's quite literally what's happening. Now, in the next 3 videos, I'm also going to talk about testosterone boosting activities. I've already mentioned the pulse generator there, but I'm going to also show you at least 4 things that you can do to boost testosterone by using your body and using your mind. And it's pretty simple. Now, what about fat loss? We're also going to be talking about that. And just to show you that I've got really garbage genetics when it comes to fat loss, listen. Shortly after 20, my FTO genes will go over and I got fat.
Yeah. Yeah, those are powerful genes, those FTO. The BBC did a whole 1-hour documentary on that gene.
We didn't even talk about that, did we? Have we talked about that yet?
No, it's in there though, for sure.
Is that it? There we go. Look, so I've got a pretty impressive
worst ones you can have.
So I've got the worst obesity genes that you can have.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, you could have other ones on top of that, but have 3 pluses on these FTO genes is definitely stacked up against you. It basically means your fat cells want to store fat more than most people. You don't want to burn it as energy. You just want to store it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, and their plus means that I've got double copies. Double copies. And it makes a lot of sense to me because I struggled to get lean. When I went through and did my PT course, they said to do this and do that, and that's the best that I could do. I could put on the muscle all right, but I could never get lean. And I thought I was doomed. Every time I tried 3 times, and I got to a place where I had no energy, and I felt like I was losing all the hard-earned muscle that I put on, and I was. Now, because I understand the science behind it, the hormones, the transporters, the inhibitors, and how to burn it, that's what I maintain year-round now. And it seems like, oh, shit, I'll never get to that place. Well, that's what I thought too. That's what I thought. But you can get there. And again, you don't need elite genetics, great genetics. I mean, yeah, you don't need that. But you can certainly have average or garbage genetics, and you can get to that place. So the way we're going to unpack it is this. So I'm going to walk you through the 9 steps. There's 3 big ideas and 9 steps, and we've covered a few of the steps there. I'm going to show you what to do to finally get the food choices right. But to get to that place, what we have to understand, especially if this is the first video you watched, they're all linked below too, that we need a framework and we need to unlock our metabolism so we can have consistent energy, testosterone production, and focused energy. Then we've got to have big lifestyle change. There's a lot of things that you're not doing that boost testosterone. We'll talk about that in these videos here. So the first video, shine the torch on how the system is busted. They don't care about your low T. And just to drive that point home, Dr. Amy B. Keelan, listen.
Increased problems with mood disorders, depression, insomnia, anxiety, all of that goes up as you have lower testosterone levels. And then certainly sexual dysfunction. So everything from low libido to low sperm counts and infertility are all associated with low testosterone. So it's not something that we should just brush off of being like, it's no big deal. Like, it's kind of a big deal. It actually means that our men are getting less and less healthy, and they're more and more likely to suffer from some kind of disease problem.
Yeah, so basically the advice that we've been given is biasing us to be this dude here, and we want to be this legend here. So why handicap yourself? As I spoke about throughout this video, there are men in their 90s and they're not rare and they're kicking ass. And we can be that person even with bad genetics. And as the great Einstein famously said, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of the truth. And I've spoken to Dr. Ken Berry several times, and when he said this to me, I paid attention. Listen,
Then we could work out a solution quite easily to fix this problem. I mean, Look at COVID this year. I mean, all these, it's a classic example of exactly what you just explained.
Yeah. And there's a subset of the population in the low carb sphere who believe that the government understands everything you and I just said about cholesterol, and that they actually like it for men and women to have a very low testosterone level, because when your T's low, you tend to just roll over and take it, don't you?
That's it.
Could you imagine trying to govern a population that had optimized testosterone levels, and you were trying to, in some way, force them to do something they didn't want to do, or force them to do something that was just wrong? That would not go well for you if you were the government.
Yeah, so you're going to roll over and take it and just slowly become this dude there. There's something else that I want to play for you. Dr. Ken, I recently spoke with him, and he gave all of us men a pretty big warning. Listen.
Absolutely. It's often too late by the time you've become financially comfortable.
Yeah.
Very often you've done so much damage to every tiny artery in your body that you're now stuck with permanent erectile dysfunction, or permanent forgetfulness, or permanent insomnia, permanent shortness of breath, chest pain, right? Gut issues. You've done so much damage. Some of it can't be taken back. And that's why I'm so active on social media, constantly reaching out and trying to help people, because once it's too late, you might regain a little bit of that function, but it's never going to be like it once was, and it's never going to be like it could have been.
So they busted us. And this is what's happening to a lot of men. I'm sick and tired of it. It was happening to me for a long time. So the system is clearly busted. They don't really care about LOT. Big Pharma comes along, we become a lifelong customer. So there's new cutting edge science out there that we need to listen to and follow. So the first thing that I mentioned in this video series that's linked below, we've got to get a comprehensive metabolic blood panel. Why? Quite simply, as I've been mentioning, you got standard panels, then you've got panels that are optimal. You want to be optimal if you want energy, focus, muscle mass, courage, all of it. And insulin, fasting insulin is ridiculous. They say that 2.6 to 24.9 is good. Yeah, nah. Yeah, I heard what you said, system, but nah, I'm not going to pay attention to it anymore. We need to get it between 2 and 5, because when insulin is up too high over here, your hard-earned T goes to estrogen and you shut down cold. So we've got to pay attention to optimal blood panels. And the video is linked below. Now, this video over here talked about the chemicals and how to accelerate testosterone. So that video is linked below. Now, the other video was all about the omega, right? And just to, especially if you haven't seen that video, the omega index is the fats that we choose to eat. And the problem with the Western diet, it's saturated with omega-6. So over time, your omega index climbs up, and you can fix this too. That video is linked below. And when you got way too much omega-6, and it should be noted that there's nothing wrong with omega-6, we just got too much of it. We get leptin resistance. So what does that mean? You're hungry all the time. You're tired all the time. You've also got insulin resistance, which means low T. So you pack it on the body fat, but you want to be this dude over there, and you can get to that place. And this one here, as I spoke about in that previous video, was all about testicular volume. So you feed, this is for young, healthy men. So you can fix this problem. They gave the men the right fats, it increased testicular size. The wrong fats decreased testicular size. And this is what they're telling you to eat. Lots of omega-6. Again, nothing wrong with omega-6. We just got way too much of it in our diet. So that video is linked below. And this one was all about showing you that we're all different. Some people have got fantastic genetics. They can eat basically anything and still kick ass. Some people like myself, garbage genetics. We've got to be super careful about what we put in and on our body. And that's what I do. And I'm super happy that I do, because I feel fucking amazing. So not one diet fits all. That's the big point on this video. Legends, if you like these videos, join the conversation below, give it a thumbs up and share it so we can reach more men, so we can finally get to a place where we're kicking ass as men and we can become the men we were born to be. So how do you fix this problem, what foods to eat. So as I mentioned in the middle of this video, the large majority of men that we help have got sensitivities to the things that I mentioned in this video. So link below, what I do have is a link to Dr. Ken Berry, and he's got an elimination diet that you can follow. So that's where I'd start, right there. If you want to do genetics, I've got another link to 23andMe. What this is going to give you is a kit. This kit will come to you, you spit in it, you send it back, they sequence your genome. Then in these videos here, I'll show you exactly what to do with those, with that data. So you can actually action it and do something about it. And I'll also talk about one more thing that you can do. Instead of the genetics there, which is a little bit cheaper, then you can truly find out some of the foods that you are sensitive to. But I would start right now with an elimination diet. That's kind of where I started way back in the day. And that's when my energy started to come back. So what we have to understand, legends, that the system is busted. Blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of the truth. Now, if you want to be walking around with a 4-cylinder engine inside you, not a lot of energy, not a lot of muscle mass, not a lot of courage, then follow mainstream's advice. But if you want this V8 engine inside you revved up and put a supercharger on that son of a bitch, you can do that. It's an amazing time to be alive. We've got cutting edge science out there that shows us how to do it, but it's all for naught if you don't get that comprehensive metabolic blood panel, because you've got no idea where you're busted inside. We're all different, and that is the point. We can fix this problem. But the caveat that I'll leave you with is that, as Dr. Ken Berry said, you know, if you're edging to 50 and 60, you've probably done a lot of damage. You can unwind some of that damage. There's advanced things you can do like stem cell therapy. There's a lot of things you can do to fix that problem, but you don't want to have to go down that path. You don't want to go there. So pay attention to the new science, because you can get your energy back, your courage, your testosterone, your muscle mass, and be the man you were born to be. We can do this, but we've got to stop listening to mainstream advice. Never worked for me, and more than likely it hasn't worked for you. So if you got any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next video.